right. Welcome back, everybody. We've got 18 folks, so we can get going a little bit here. Ethan, did you want to maybe take everyone through a quick run through of the documents you provided yesterday?
Well, not necessarily, but absolutely. First, just our distribution system planning recommendations. Let's see if I can share this. Am I sharing correctly?
Looks like it. Yep, we got it.
Miracles of technology. Okay. We just went through and addressed some of the remaining outstanding items. We just generally coming in on consensus that we'll be filing a plan is consensus, and then there's some non-consensus between the utilities and OPC about the approval, which I hope we can have some further conversation on. We, minimum filing every 3 years. That the three scenarios we brought out, that was a big point that a lot of people wanted to be clear on. The points of stakeholder engagement. I'm just hitting the big ones here in the interest of time. Little description of the improvements to our distribution process, and that's one of the main items from the CSNA. DER forecasting, load forecasting, hosting capacity, all the items that are called out for. It's been the kind of the CSA 11 items. We would report on grid needs, including the development of bidirectional grid and screening of possible solutions. We are, anyway, we do make a lengthy note about how we currently approach non-wire solutions, which I think is worth everyone taking in. I've noticed there's been a lot of talk about them today and over the past weeks, and just for people to understand how we approach non-wire solutions, that right now they are challenged, and that landscape will change with battery storage prices and new batteries technologies coming online, as well as any kind of a locational value of DERs that could be implemented by the state, and state regulation state goals could change those values. But right now, non-wire solutions, take it from someone who's implemented a couple, they are a challenge to implement, and oftentimes the wire solution is just cheaper. And I always give the example of the unusual case of the two non-wires that I was a part of implementing. They were justified because of a need for a large 10-mile underground feeder, and that the economics of that made the batteries pencil. But that is not always going to be the situation. That's an unusual situation. So, non-wires are still challenging to implement, especially when it comes to, say, batteries. Let's see if I can change to the metrics.
Well, you want to take questions before you jump in here? I mean,
yeah.
Are you willing to take questions? I know you don't want to, but I'm teasing, of course.
Please, let's go ahead.
All right. Any questions on the document Ethan just had up, and I think it was provided to everyone yesterday? Is Jacob OPC on? Oh, there we go. Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, just appreciating this, but I'm just, could the utilities clarify what this is? It's your report, Judge McLean, actually goes through the items that are specified in JADE, which we have discussed one by one. And since the commission asked us to reflect on that framework and talk about its adoption for DSP. That seems to be an appropriate format. This is more sort of a selected set of items, and so I'm not quite sure what is exactly this supposed to do. If it's not supposed to replace your report, which I would certainly not recommend, what exactly is it supposed to do, since it touches on some items but not on others? And for example, in that last piece, where it's talking about, hold on, I'll pull it up. I've got it here. The last piece talks about solution investments should be evaluated with equity and climate factors, equity considerations, including economic, energy, and climate factors. But it doesn't talk about some of the other aspects we talked about in terms of considering solution investments. And so it's partitive. It's not complete, and I'm just not sure what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, I'll take a first jump at this, and Ethan, feel free to add anything else that I may miss. I think a couple thoughts that we had in terms of putting this together was, as we've talked about within this whole working group, it's not just about a resulting process, but then what are the recommendations, what are the changes to the DSP, like actual planning process that need to evolve as a result of all those jade boxes and all those discussions, right? It's a combination of a filing process and evolutions to the DSP actual kind of engineering process. And so the goal here was, as much as possible, to take all the discussions and the captured in the final report, to take all that language and start to work towards what may start to become COMAR language, right? At the end of the day, as a result of this, as a result of some order that we'll get from the commission, we'll be working towards implementing some type of regulation language. And so this was a first step in terms of identifying within the report and the discussions where there was generally consensus, identifying those points. If we miss some of those points of general consensus, can certainly look to add them in, but taking those points of general discussion consensus and those topics and starting to try and translate them into recommendations, into language that starts to reflect what may be within COMAR, right? And so when pairing this with the process proposal that the utilities put forward, looking to really kind of capture fully the work of the working group and kind of putting together that full picture.
Yeah, if you look at the section, for example, on hosting capacity, it actually comes up fairly short of the recommendations that I think we agreed on and that are reflected, or even some non-consensus points, for example, about what should be the content of hosting capacity information posted. That's all reflected in the judge's report. That's not really touched on here. So again, I don't see that if you took this document as what we would put into COMAR, it leaves out a lot of the things we've talked about, and I think even agreed upon.
Yeah, and certainly if there's points that were general consensus that we missed within that document, I think we're certainly open to putting together where, we were really focused on what were the points of general consensus. Obviously, there were points of non-consensus within the working group, or points where there were general consensus, but we didn't have full consensus, right? Parties may have wanted to go beyond what general consensus was. So we were trying to capture all the points that were at that general consensus level. And I will note with the hosting capacity, the one thing in there, we actually recommended, which I guess is slightly different from capturing the general consensus, recommending that public-facing maps actually be passed all along to the interconnection working group, since that's really a interconnection topic than it is a planning topic. Hosting capacity analysis is a planning topic, and we had one recommendation there. So that piece was slightly different, but in general, we are trying to just capture the spirit of the general consensus items into language that could start to be reflected in regulation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again, I think that I would come back to the suggestion that the more detailed report that the judges drafted is actually the report, and that this, along with the OPC piece and maybe the metrics piece, be submitted along with that as additional input. But this one is well, I don't think it does justice to all of the discussions and the conclusions and even the consensus points that we agreed on. But I understand that with multiple utilities involved, it's hard to if we take all of that and turn it into a single thing. But, okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
and certainly not trying to replace the whole report. There's way more detail in there, way more context that's important. But to your point, just trying to start to move towards a single piece of language that reflects it.
All right, thank you, Jacob. Tim.
Yeah, I think partially agree with Al, partially agree with y'all. I think this is a really good, this is the direction we need to move in terms of talking about, the specifics of the the points of consensus and non-consensus. I think the way that I would move forward with this, I will confess that I have not read through it. I think I've like kind of given it the like skim through, but in terms of I would like to move forward with this, kind of looking at it in the context, like alongside the judge's report, and seeing where we can pull, like, okay, we do have a consensus item there, and make sure that that's like, specifically addressed within the judge's report, as we move forward. So I think that this is like a helpful piece to start the conversation on consensus and non-consensus items.
All right, thanks, Tim. And it'll help me from the standpoint of at least the joint utilities have kind of specified, given me more specified, I guess, positions from their respect on where they stand. And I like Tim, I haven't gone through it, just given a cursory review, so I still need to go through it again.
Sure.
Anybody else on this document? All right. Okay, Ethan or PHI Jake?
I think he has. Yeah, I think Ethan has to step out at 2, so I can.
Okay.
Apologies.
It's no problem.
We'll hold it against Ethan. I kid. Let me pull up the other documents to walk through.
Sure.
Right, let me know if you can see what I'm sharing.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay. So this was, I think, a request either last meeting or maybe even 2 meetings ago, from Al, expressing kind of some concerns with some of the language within the utility straw proposal, and it being framed as a report, which is typically connected to past looking. Right, a report's looking backwards and not necessarily looking forwards, and so looking to change some of the language within the straw proposal to make it clearer what was always our intent, which was that it's a forward-looking plan that people are being able to give feedback on for utilities to incorporate. And so started to just make some changes to some of that language to better reflect that this in general is a reporting process, but the document itself, what's actually being filed, and this is really reflected in step 4 is where most of the changes are, is that instead of us publishing a report, being clear that we're just publishing the distribution system plan, which is that forward-looking view. And so really just changing the language to try and reflect that, and adding some clarity here around the constraints and the prospective solutions that we were looking to incorporate. And so that was just a few minor tweaks there at the request from Al in terms of providing that clarification. So we went through, I think Ethan had sent out both the clean version and the red line version. So I don't know if there are any questions on that document.
Al, does that kind of address your concerns?
Yeah, as I said in the first part of today's meeting, yes,
Right.
I think that the changes they've made are
okay.
And in general, I thought that folks were pretty much on board with this, except for that those areas that have been clarified.
Right. Agreed. Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you confirming that. Anybody else? All right, we're rolling. All right, I think the last thing that Ethan had provided, Jacob, was I guess it was the utilities kind of weighing in a little bit on the a few of the metric issues where you had noted some opposition before, but you kind of gave a little more specificity as to what the issue was. And I will note that Tim provided a revised version of the metrics, which may have addressed some of those issues.
And I think they did operate off of that.
Okay, good. All right.
Do you want me to share that document too?
Sure. Just if you don't mind, we can just go through it real quick, and maybe if anyone has any concerns or wants to weigh in on some of the things you've changed.
Sure. Let me pull that one up.
And thank you for providing that red line version, Tim. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Certainly makes my life easier.
Let me share my screen again. And I think in this document as well, I don't think there was anything new or any really changes to kind of what we communicated as our position during the working group or even in the subgroup, and was identified in the comments, but really just adding it now to the full written pieces of the document. So to highlight, I think where the changes we had made was the non-consensus item here, recognizing that reporting SAIDI for contribution of overloaded isn't necessarily appropriate for DSP, and the way that's reported is slightly different to planning, but also recommend reporting more on overload conditions observed at the substation. So this is more a planning function of when any forecasting overloads that will require immediate attention. Continuing on to the next section for storage metrics, really recommend, and this was kind of the theme throughout these comments, and I think again a theme for our comments in general on it, was certainly not opposed to these metrics, but recognizing DSP is not the technical experts in a lot of these sections. And so really recommending rather to refer these sections and these recommended metrics to other working groups where those SMEs will exist. So for storage example, referring them to the storage working group. Continuing on the same recommendation for the EV metrics, recommending that those metrics that are considered be passed on to the EV working group for consideration in semi-annual reports, as well as some of the demand response and aggregate peak information be passed along to the Empower, where much of that is managed. Again, for additional EV managed charging programs, they exist within the EV working group, recommend passing them along for consideration there. And then non-wires recommend that that the rate case is a place where that may be considered for discussion and capture from the utilities. So that was kind of the main gist of our recommendations there. And like I said, I don't think any of that was inconsistent with what we had recommended before, just that other working groups have SMEs and people that should have input into these metrics. And so recommend that we, as a working group, we recommend them for consideration from those other groups. You're on mute, Judge.
Thanks. Sorry. Appreciate you taking the time and clarifying exactly where you guys stood on those. All right. So I guess for those in the subgroup, that shouldn't have been a news flash. Any comments, questions, or concerns about the document Jacob's got up, or any of the recommendations that joint utilities are making? Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, why be shy, right? So yeah, I think that Jacob's latter point, or near latter point, comes to that discussion that you wanted to have, Judge McLean, about the two different perspectives on what did it mean to have a particular metric be shared with another working group. So my understanding was that there were certainly ones, and I appreciate the points that were made, that the other working groups have a stake in those metrics, and they also have expertise to bring to those metrics, and that we would want to share it with them to achieve harmonization, so that both working groups were looking at a metric that made sense, or maybe there would need to be two, one that's more relevant to DSP, one that's more relevant to EVs or interconnection or whatever. But that harmonization effort take place, but that we would not abandon them as DSP metrics, that we would, and that comes to the point of still, I strongly feel the need for a consolidated report with a different metrics related to DSP are all brought together by somebody. And again, that wouldn't be like recalculating ones. We had this discussion, not recalculating ones that have already been reported in another report, but that actually incorporating, just bringing them forward, what was cut and paste as it was referred to, so that they're all in one place, that help us understand what is happening with the distribution system as it evolves. So I got from, in your report, Judge, I got the sense that we would be essentially handing them over and not keeping them as part of the DSP reporting and monitoring process. I don't think that's probably the best way to go, but I think that having them harmonized with the other groups that have the expertise and engagement is rational and necessary.
Right. And I'll apologize if I didn't. I'll go back to all the work group leaders and I'll try and rephrase it to be consistent with what you had just said, Al. I wasn't. I don't know what their answers will be, but we'll see. But I'll try and revisit that issue. I appreciate you bringing that up. Anybody else have any questions or concerns?
No, I don't think I could have said it better than Al. So I think, yeah, I'm in Al's boat.
Okay. All right. And I don't think the utilities have changed their position on that particular issue. No.
I think we, still see it as duplicative.
No, that's fine. I think maybe the way I phrased it to the various work group leaders may have been incorrect. So, what I might do is just draft an email, send it to, Jacob, Tim, and Al to make sure I've got the understanding correct, and then send that out again. I'm not sure what if that'll change their positions or not, but at least I'll have the parties' positions correct. All right. All right. Does anybody have anything else to talk about aside from the report? All right. Our afternoon sessions go a lot quicker. Maybe we should just start in the afternoon. All right. So timelines for the report or comments. So we've got an April 30th deadline. And let's see. I sent it out last Thursday. Is it feasible to get things by the 11th? So just your initial comments, so that way I can try and work them in and send everybody another draft so they can have another hack at it.
So just to clarify, I think you did just clarify it, but by the 11th wouldn't be the final time parties would have an opportunity to provide feedback
on the first draft.
Right.
So my hope would be if you can get them to me earlier, I appreciate that. Al's gotten me some comments. And I saw a comment from John Borkowski that I'll take up with Paul offline. But yeah, if everybody can get them to me by the 11th, and I can try and turn around another draft sometime the week of the 15th for everybody to have a second cut at it. That reasonable? Okay, I'm getting some hands, getting some great. Okay, and I know you guys, the utilities have some, a lot of coordination you guys have to do internally. So I know it makes it a little more difficult for you. But Jacob Auslander, is that acceptable to OPC? Is there something specific you wanted to talk about the draft today, or are you okay with doing red line comments?
Yeah, I think red line comments
Okay.
are one just overarching thing that might get lost in our detailed comments is the headers that, I mean, this is really getting a little persnickety, but the little headers that say like general consensus or non-consensus,
Right.
Or consensus. I mean, like, some of those give us a little bit of heartburn because I think there's different kinds of consensus. I think sometimes there's consensus on the overall approach, but then like some of the details are off. But then there's also sometimes where like there's consensus amongst like certain coalitions of stakeholders, but then just the utilities don't agree, and then sometimes it's just considered non-consensus.
Well, okay. Well, all right. That's fine. Do you have a different label for me then?
I mean, I guess if we're going to use those labels at the headers, then I guess I'd prefer partial consensus
Versus general? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I've used general before, but partial is fine. That's an easy one.
Yeah. And then, I mean, one thing that I'd hope is that as you get these comments back, the level of consensus will be like fully reflected. Cause, I think, you know, with our straw proposal, and one of the things that's given the utilities the heartburn is our view about the level of approval that the commission would have it. You know, I understand that we developed our straw like outside of a subgroup, you know, a subgroup format, but we've been involved in a lot of subgroups and in all phases of this case and in every one of these meetings, and we brought up our position on that before. So I don't think it really could come, you know, realistically came as a surprise to the utilities that we had that opinion. And so, you know, I think we can reflect this in our comments, but I guess we're just a little concerned about the way our straw proposal is being characterized or possibly characterized as this like thing that the utilities were first hearing about all of this. And, you know, I don't know that that was accurate.
Okay. Well, I mean, again, that's why it's a draft. So I'm happy to consider any changes folks have.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. No problem. All right. Anybody else have any questions? And what I'll try and do is when I send the second version around, I'll try and highlight what changes I've made. Maybe I'll put it in bold or different font or different color, something like that. So you don't necessarily have to read the entire 70 plus pages. Okay. All right. Anybody else? All right. Then the last thing, do we want to schedule a meeting for the 18th to talk about any potential updates? I mean, we could always cancel it later. I know, I guess OPC and the joint utilities may have some further discussions on the process in terms of types of hearing and approvals.
And the timelines and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, I know you guys are going to, at least there was some discussion about that. So do we want to have one more meeting? Or again, we can schedule it, and if there's been no progress, we can always just cancel it.
Yeah, that would be fine for OPC.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it makes sense at least to schedule some type of check-in, even if it's not for the full time.
Okay, fine. All right, we can do that. I'll put something together, and we'll go at 10 o'clock on the 18th. Okay. All right. Anybody else? All right, great. All right, thanks. I'll look forward to your comments. Again, if you could do them in track changes, I would be grateful. All right. Otherwise, I'm not going to read it. So, all right.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks.